All right, so I don't usually cover these kinds of online drama beefs or whatever you want to call it within left wing or right wing media spheres, but this one kind of stood out to me at least a little bit because of some questionable takes here from none other than Steven Crowder from the Not Daily Wire on his recent divorce with his now ex-wife. So we're going to get into this clip, and then I'm going to show you a little bit here from a montage of sorts that the Surfs, Lance from the Surfs, put together in terms of this back and forth between Steven Crowder and Candace Owens, which is sort of like culminating after the fact of that recent beef that we covered a couple of months ago between the Daily Wire and Steven Crowder when they were trying to hire him as a pundit, as a commentator. He came out and he said this like $50 million contract was wildly exploitative. Somehow the contracts that, average Amazon delivery drivers get for pennies on the dollar, where they're having to shit in bags and piss in water bottles on the job to meet their quotas. Somehow that's the free market. That's beautiful capitalism at its finest. But when Steven Crowder gets offered $50 million to go work at the Daily Wire to continue his propaganda outfit, somehow that's exploitative. So there was that whole beef that sort of culminated in this moment that we get right now. So I want you guys to just pay attention to what Steven Crowder says about his divorce. Okay, so let's jump into this real quick.
I have been living with a proverbial boot on my neck for going on years now.
I just want to pause right there. Okay, this is something that just popped into my brain when he said boot on the neck. But keep in mind, we're talking about Steven Crowder here, a guy who literally reenacted the death of George Floyd, okay, to try to make some sort of a political goof or gag and to make light of what happened to George Floyd just a couple of years ago, okay? That's who we're talking about here. But now he has the boot on his neck because of the divorce laws within Texas. So let's see what he has to say here.
Since 2021, I've been living through what has increasingly been a horrendous divorce. Now, let me say on the outset, to be clear, there is no infidelity, any kind of physical abuse at all on either side. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted.
I'm sorry. What was that? In the state of Texas, that's legally permitted? Is that the choice of words that you're going with there? Crowder, man, I mean, listen, he's talking about his divorce here, right? Nobody wants to, see anybody go through a divorce, all of that, right? I personally, my parents got divorced when I was very young. I know how formative that can be. I know that it, can be a disaster for certain people. In some other circumstances, it can be somewhat okay. But you're talking about your divorce. And the first thing, okay, this is a pre-planned segment that Steven Crowder came up with here. And the first thing that pops into his mind is to comment on the fact that under Texas law, which I think is actually just the law broadly around the country for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, but he's complaining about the Texas law that allows his wife to divorce him or to leave him without his permission. And he's sort of like admonishing that, right? He's bummed out about the fact that the laws surrounding marriage in the United States allow for his wife to, by her own volition, decide to leave him for whatever the reason may be. Okay, that's what you're complaining about here. That's what you decided to put at the forefront of your commentary on this issue. Okay, sure, that's a decision one could make in this kind of a circumstance, but let's hear him out. Let's see what else he's got to say about this.
It's been the most heartbreaking experience of my life, what I consider to be my deepest personal failure. And just so you know, my opinions on parenting and families have not changed. I've always believed that children need a mom and a dad, that divorce is horrible. And I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter.
He brought it up again. He brought it up a second time. The divorce laws within Texas, how oppressive they are, that you wouldn't be able to, I guess, force your wife who doesn't want to be with you to stay in that marriage? That's really what you're openly arguing? This is the second time, and we're only, less than a minute into this video? Okay, this is the segment he decided to put out to his hundreds of thousands of viewers, is that he's mad that the Texas law allows his wife to leave her, or to leave him or her, depending on whether or not, he decides to dress up and do drag on that day, but that's a different tangential point. He's complaining that his wife has the autonomy, the legal autonomy, to leave him. Okay, that's what the law permits, all right? He's complaining about that here.
In Texas, divorce is permitted when one party wants it, period. So for well over a year, in the best interest as well as physical safety of my children, we've decided to keep this issue private and to resolve it privately with the appropriate attorneys, what have you, legal jargon. And all this, one thing I want to be really clear about is certain. True north here is that my children are blameless, completely without fault, and so we decided to resolve these issues privately.
All right, I just want to pause on that for a second. Steven Crowder's children are like infants, like they're babies, okay? They're not even like probably cognitively aware of what's going on right now. Why did you bring up that your children are blameless? Were people within your audience, were radical lefties on the outside saying, fuck your children? We blame your children for this divorce? I mean, where did that come from? He's just singling out his kids and saying somehow the reality of his divorce that's ongoing is somehow going to be a direct threat to the safety of his children, and saying, no, guys, not as you may have thought at the beginning of this, my children are not to blame for this. I don't think anybody was saying that, man. I mean, he just throws that in there casually in a very strange way here. And honestly, part of what I wanted to say about this clip is that it seems like there's something deeper going on here, right? I mean, if you were just having like a standard divorce, that's not uncommon, okay? A majority of marriages arguably end in divorce, okay? So it's not like some radical thing that's going to destroy your career and everybody's going to be upset with you or something. If you were just a normal guy and handled this in a normal way and didn't complain about the Texas laws that allow your wife to leave you if she wants to, okay, and you just handle this in a standard way, nobody would have made a big deal about it. So the follow-up question to that, in my head at least, is there's got to be something else going on here, right? Okay, there's got to be something deeper going on here. Maybe it was some issue with his marriage. Maybe it was, something else having to do with, people have speculated about Steven Crowder and his preferences when it comes to, being in certain types of relationships. So there's a lot of speculation going on right now. But clearly, I think based on what he's saying here, there's got to be something deeper than just you got a divorce. Because if that was the case, nobody would really make that big of a deal about it. But he continues here.
As it's in their best interests, both emotionally and physically, to do so. Now, the other issue is, and this is something that I've kept private for likely far too long, many other people knew about this behind the scenes. Some, not all, but some of them in positions of power, influence, leverage, knew of this. They also knew that the safety of my children included keeping it private. So if you're familiar with the idea of extortion, then you know the feeling well. Now, some of these threats were so thinly veiled that I'm frankly surprised you didn't all guess immediately.
Steve?
Okay, so then he jumps in to pushing back to this old beef from months ago. I mean, they point out here, January 24th. All right, we are months after the fact, and this is a clip of Candace Owens back during this Daily Wire versus Steven Crowder beef, where she's basically saying, oh, Steven Crowder, he's got some personal shit going on in his life. I'm not going to get into the details of it now, but, pray for him and whatever the case may be. Steven Crowder is calling that extortion. Okay, again, I mean, think about it, guys. If you had a normal divorce and people knew about that divorce, but you hadn't made it public, and they were threatening to release that information, is that really extortion? I mean, it seems like that's something that would have become public inevitably at some point, and it's not that big of a fucking deal. It's like the Streisand effect, where by your focusing on this, by your saying that other deranged right-wing commentators like Candace Owens are extorting you, you're making a way bigger deal out of this than it otherwise would have been. But now we jump to the Candace Owens sort of response to this entire situation, where it gets even better, because now we're going to be apparently having lawsuits flying back and forth between Candace Owens and Steven Crowder's show. So let's go ahead and jump into this one real quick.
He even sent me a retrospectively very flirty message thereafter on Instagram about how nice I looked on election night, even though I didn't respond to it. I found Hillary Crowder's Instagram account, and I looked to see, and it turned out that she didn't follow Steven Crowder, and that Steven Crowder didn't follow her. He didn't follow anybody in her family, and she wasn't following anybody in his family. That was my aha moment. Clearly, there was some sort of a separation. Now, I will not take that lightly, okay? I am not Hillary Crowder. I am not anybody in his family. I am not going to take somebody going onto his platform and alleging that I either harassed, threatened, or did anything that would put his children at risk. That is very serious stuff that he is saying. And so what I did this morning after this clip was sent to me is I contacted a defamation lawyer, and I am sending Steven Crowder a cease and desist. And I'm going to demand a full-throated retraction to the idea that Candace Owens threatened him or extorted him. And not, it seems to me, Steven, that you really, for whatever reason, want to insert me into this narrative. Like there is just something about me that you are hyper-focused on. And so I want to help you a bit. And really, I want to help your wife because you essentially just used your platform. Millions of people have access to your platform. She doesn't have the same, to insult her. You picked the wrong woman, okay? So here's what I would like to do. I would like to invite Hillary Crowder onto my platform because she doesn't have one. And because her ex-husband apparently just used his to insult her, to say that he picked the wrong woman, I find that to be really despicable.
Okay, so that's where we're at right now. All right, listen, so this is obviously amazing for so many different reasons. I mean, listen, we on the left, we have constant issues of splintering and factionalization where people who call themselves socialists will fight with people who call themselves communists, will fight with people who call themselves social democrats. And we've had so many different splits that it's kind of refreshing a little bit, at least, to see that the right also has these like bizarre infighting tendencies going on within their movement. But at the end of the day, what are we going to take away from this, right? We're about to have apparently Candace Owens suing Steven Crowder, Steven Crowder potentially countersuing Candace Owens and the Daily Wire. Okay, we have Steven Crowder who's out here complaining about the laws within Texas that allow his wife in order to actually divorce him by her own choice, by her own volition, and by her own decision making. Okay, which apparently he has an issue with, which isn't that surprising given the sort of theocratic right-wing narratives that he is pushing constantly on his channel. But we have this bizarre situation where all of these right-wing pundits and commentators are going at each other's throats over stuff that is seemingly like not that big of a deal. So part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that there's definitely something else going on with Steven Crowder, right? It can't be as simple as he's threatening lawsuits over, people talking about his divorce in a public way as if that is going to threaten the lives of his children or something like that. It's just absolutely a bizarre situation. But again, at the same time, seeing some of our favorite right-wing deranged commentators go at each other's throats like this, it's kind of nice to see.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best Politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying